And to break down this game, to my immediate left, Douzable, and our other analyst, co-host of All Things Covered, Bryant McFadden. So, guys, the Eagles have matched their best start at 7-0 in franchise history. 2004, they did lose the Super Bowl that year. We knew this was a good team, a playoff team from last year. We just didn't know how good they were going to be and if Jalen Hurts could take the next step. We'll talk about Jalen Hurts in a bit here, but B-Mac, I'll start with you. What's been different about this team? What continues to impress you during this undefeated start?
I think first and foremost, guys, the roster is much better than what they had a year ago. You look at the draft, some of the draft picks that have panned out. You look at some of the moves they made via free agency. You look at the big-time draft day trade. Acquiring A.J. Brown has been an outstanding piece. He's been an outstanding piece to their success on the offensive side. So I think that is the first thing that sticks out to me in regards to why this team has been so successful. And then you got to go ahead and look at the quarterback play in Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a much better quarterback with A.J. Brown than without A.J. Brown. And we see that. And then you look at the chemistry that he has established, not just with A.J. Brown, with Devontae. You look at Goddard. All the guys there offensively at the skill positions have really become a better player, not to mention they're healthy as well. And then when you transition to the defensive side, oh my goodness, lights out, lights out. That has been the motto for their defense. Adding James Bradbury has been a big time plus. You look at some of the big additions they made via the draft. Jordan Davis, who is out, by the way, but he's been huge. Reddick has been an outstanding member as well. So just adding big time pieces to their team on both sides of the football has been beneficial. But you have to start and stop this conversation with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, B-Mac, this is the most complete roster in the NFL currently right now. I mean, point out a weakness. Like, I literally combed through this roster. There really isn't a weakness. You look at the offensive line, it's one of the best in football, not only running the ball, but pass protection. The defensive line, you talked about it, B-Mac, the additions they made in the offseason. Hassan Reddick, getting Robert Quinn right before the trade deadline to make sure you have ample bodies to throw at different passers. You look at the linebackers' position. Kaiser White has been balling this year. The secondary, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, getting him in a trade right before the season was big to really shore up that safety position. And they have two of the best corner tandems in the league when you talk about big play Slay and James Bradbury. On the offensive side, right, playmakers on the outside, A.J. Brown, they trade for him during the draft. Devontae Smith could be a number one on most teams. Dallas Goedert is a baller at tight end position. I think the one question mark we had going into the season was the quarterback position. And Jalen Hurts has answered all those questions. I like his growth, more specifically in the pocket. Last week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, throwing absolute dimes to A.J. Brown, not just using his legs and relying on his legs. When they decide to stop the run, he's been able to beat teams with his arm. His growth is why this team is 8-0 right now.
Throwing those deep balls, what looked like carbon copy to the right, down the sideline end zone to Brown, and it was a thing of beauty here. And his odds have also been reflective of his play. Third best odds, only behind Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And we saw it there for the Eagles. They started the year 25-1. Now at 5-1, that is the best in the NFC. So you guys have mentioned Jalen Hurts, and Lige, I'll throw it back to you. So where would you rank him today in terms of would you have him over guys like Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow? Because all those guys had better MVP odds than Jalen Hurts had before the year.
Which is highly disrespectful. Right now, he's number one on my list. I mean, look at his touchdown to interception ratio. And then look what he's added also as far as running the ball and getting into the end zone. 10 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, 6 rushing touchdowns. This guy is playing MVP-like football. I don't understand how you don't, at minimum, have him as a top 3 candidate to win the MVP. He is on the only team that is undefeated in the NFL, and they're blowing people out. So it's absurd that he's not, a top 3 pick in the MVP race. Right now, he's my number one guy, and I think he's going to show today, going back home to Houston in front of friends and families, why he should be the number one guy in the MVP race.
I think being top 3 right now currently is deserving because he's earned that right. I can't put him number 1 on my list. Not just yet. I can't. Because, man, you talk about my number 1 guy is Money Pat Mahomes right now. Based on what he's been able to do, we felt like we would see a drop-off not having Tyreek Hill. But Pat Mahomes has been balling. Josh Allen is right there as well. So I like the top 3 guys, but my number 1 is Money Pat Mahomes, man. Pat Mahomes has been unbelievable. And you look at the other 2 quarterbacks, I think it's safe to say in totality, they have better pass catchers surrounding them. I think Josh Allen has a better cast of pass catchers. Clearly, Jalen Hurts has a better cast of pass catchers as well. And I understand Travis Kelce he's an outlier when you look at the tight end position, kind of in a league of his own. But outside of that, it's kind of the who's of who, right? Who do you need to depend on? Who can you depend on? It doesn't matter when you have Pat Mahomes. So I would have Pat Mahomes number one, but clearly Jalen Hurts should be in the top three with Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, and the aforementioned Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, well, anyone having a Jalen Hurts preseason ticket is looking pretty good because, again, he wasn't in the top 11. Let me give you names again that are ahead of him before the year. Brady, Rodgers, Burrow, Prescott, Stafford, and Murray all had shorter odds than Jalen Hurts to win MVP to start the year, and he had a monster day against the Steelers last week. Let's dive into a key matchup, guys, which is the Eagles D-line, the Texans O-line. We did get a bit of a taste. Three-time Pro Bowl defensive end Robert Quinn, 20 defensive snaps, did hit the quarterback once here. Lige, when you target this matchup, what stands out to you?
Yeah, if you look at this Houston Texans offensive line, it's actually pretty good. I mean, Laramie Tunsil is playing at an all-pro caliber rate right now. Titus Howard, their right tackle, who was a first-round pick, is playing at a high level as well. Kenyon Green got welcomed to the NFL last week versus Jeffrey Simmons, but he does that to a lot of different offensive lines throughout the season. He did that to Quentin Nelson last week, and he's an all-pro offensive guard. And then A.J. Cann has played really well at the right guard. Missed last week, will come back. What I'm looking at is when the Philadelphia Eagles, I like what they do on third down. They go with a five-man front that way. All five guys have one-on-one pass rush opportunities. They move Hassan Reddick around. Sometimes they have him as the spinner inside, and they'll run some pass rush games, and somebody will come free. We saw the big sack last week versus Kenny Pickett on a pass rush game. And they'll move Fletcher Cox to the outside of the end just so he can go speed to power and collapse the pocket. That's the matchup I want to see. Can this Houston Texans offensive line, who's actually played respectfully this year, can they hold up against that pass rush from the Philadelphia Eagles and communication, passing off those pass rush games?
For me, that's the game within the game. And I agree with you. Houston, Texas, offensive line-wise, has been pretty good, to say the least, considering the circumstances. But in this matchup, man, the Eagles got too many horses. It's a horse race. The Texans don't have none. Eagles they have all the horses in this matchup based on the personnel. Adding Robert Quinn, who should be a little more acclimated to what they're doing defensively. But one thing I like in regards to the defensive line being able to dominate this matchup in tonight's game is because of how prolific and how good their secondary has been. That forces quarterbacks to hold the football a little longer than what they would like because no one is open. They do a great job in communicating. They do a great job in being in the hip pocket of the pass catcher, going through all their wallets and the identification cards and things like that. So the quarterbacks have to hold the football longer than what they would like, and that allows the guys that put their hand in the dirt to put pressure on the quarterback. So I believe we will see that same common theme, right? Outstanding coverage in the back end that will give the time that's needed for guys like Fletcher Cox, Josh Sweat, Reddick, and Robert Quinn to have a huge night against Davis Mills.
So then what do you guys think about the outlook for Dameon Pierce, who's been one of the bright spots for a very bad Texans team? It's really been him and Ken Walker III so far this year. B-Mac, I mean, if they're going to have any chance, maybe they run the football or at least try to. What are the chances they're able to do that somewhat successfully to start?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as I've been in weeks past for Pierce because I really like the job he's done. Remember, he jumped in instantly preseason with a spark, and he's provided a spark so far this season. But this is a team, when you look at throwing the football, not having Brandon Cooks in the lineup, like who do you really need to monitor in regards to the pass catchers for the Houston Texans? And we understand and know running the football has been pretty successful for them. So if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, guess what you're trying to do? Efface the running game, make them throw the football, put the football in Davis Mills' hands. And if you're able to do that, you're probably going to be successful. So I think it's going to be a tough game for Pierce based on the personnel that he's going against that we all talked about and based on just the identity defensively in which they will see from the Philadelphia Eagles, knowing that he might not have favorable matches in the box to be successful.
Yeah, B-Mac, it's not just Brandon Cooks. Their number 2 receiver, Nico Collins, is out this game. So best believe the Philadelphia Eagles are going to crowd the line of scrimmage, play man coverage on the outside, and dare Davis Mills to beat them. Dameon Pierce, get you a Pedialyte, get you 2 IVs, sir, because you're going to be doing a lot of the workload today. This game, Tommy and B-Mac, is going to remind me of Jon Snow in the Game of Thrones episode when he took on Ramsay's army, when he's out there with the sword by himself.
Yep.
But the only thing for Dameon Pierce is the Lord of Vales aren't going to come to bail you out this game. So it's going to be tough. I don't really, from a fantasy standpoint, I think it's going to be a tough day for him. Even for a prop standpoint, Dameon Pierce, because I see this defense as well as it's played, not only against the pass, but also against the run. They're going to stack the box and make Davis Mills beat them.
So I tell you what, it sounds like you guys both love the player, maybe not the situation in tonight's game. And we're showing here on the graphic, right, that he's plus 330 for Offensive Rookie of the Year behind Ken Walker's plus 150. So basically what B-Mac and Lige are telling you, don't bet him now. Wait for maybe a bad game, and maybe that gets to plus 400, plus 500. Then maybe you can jump on some value there and maybe pop that Dameon Pierce prop down the road. So I love that, guys. You guys mentioned Brandon Cooks, obviously listed as questionable for personal reasons, but not expected to play due to reports, so he's out. Yep. That's called it there. Part of it has to do with trade deadline, him wanting out. Lige, you guys have been on football teams as players. How do you handle the situation? Is it business as usual? Can you move past it, or is there something else there?
Yeah, as players in the locker room, you're paid to do a job, so it's business as usual. It sucks that one of your leaders, and he's a captain on this team, he's frustrated. I get it. But what comes with that, you also have to understand, nobody forced Brandon Cooks to sign that extension last year, right? You knew the Houston Texans could possibly not be a good team. I get it. For your longevity, and I see in a tweet, you say, don't take a man's kindness for granted. Covered for the lies for too long. Those days are done. Cross the line with my playing career. How did they cross the line? You decided to sign that extension. And by signing that extension, you have to realize that it's going to be hard for a team to come and trade for you when you're guaranteed $18 million a year next year. Now, it's different if you decide to go to the Houston Texans and say, you know what, I'll take a pay cut to make sure that I can get traded. That's a whole nother ballgame. I'm not sure if that happened or didn't happen, but you sign that extension. I'm always for the players getting as much money as they possibly can get, but you also have to know what comes with that, especially when you're on a bad team.
Man, no question. Well said. Well said. You're right. A year ago, the Texans, they were a bad team. You signed the extension. Brandon Cooks signed the extension. We all felt like this year, 2022, they might take a step or two in a better direction, but they still would be a bad team. So I feel like understanding and knowing that if you're a part of that team, you know what the future looks like potentially. So why are you mad that you were not able to be moved? They tried to move you. It's not the same like seeing guys like Chase Claypool get moved because he's still on his rookie deal. Chase Claypool was a second-round pick. He's not seeing double digits in regards to money per year like Brandon Cooks is. So if you're in your feelings, don't be mad at the organization. Be mad at yourself for signing an extension with a bad team when you have aspirations of trying to compete for a championship. And not only is this a bad look for Brandon Cooks, you talk about having that C on your jersey. One thing I know about the game of football, you cannot allow your emotions to be in front of you when you're trying to play football because nothing good ever happens in that situation. And because you have that C on your jersey, you're obligated to be a leader. Even if you're in your feelings, be in your feelings with the organization, the people that's up top. That has nothing to do with the guys you go to war with week in and week out. And get this, on a primetime stage, you're not going to battle with them. It's not right.
You guys bring up some good points, though. By the way, there was a joke that this past trade deadline was actually more active than usual in the NFL, kind of NBA-esque. Yeah. NBA players, though, they can force their moves. NFL, not so much.
Not so much.
The business of the GM say no thanks. Guys, good first segment. We'll be back with a little bit, but want to remind everybody about all things covered. Patrick Peterson reacting to the revenge game against the Cards, explaining his problem with Steve Keim. Patrick Peterson and our guy B-Mac. Scan that QR code. Check him out on YouTube as well. All right, I tell you what, one of our guys really bullish on Miles Sanders and his rushing prop tonight. See which one it is. And just how big is Philly a road favorite tonight? Historic. More on the big line when H2 continues. Time now for Stats That Matter, presented by Penske. When you gain the right transportation partner, your business gains ground. Take a look at that. All-time largest Thursday Night Football road favorites. Our guys at Sportsline put it together. Tied for the largest spread at 13.5. The Colts did cover that back in 2007. By the way, that was the Peyton Manning, Joey Harrington game back in 2007. And then just a few years ago, the Niners were laying 10.5. They did not cover. Jimmy Garoppolo did throw 4 touchdowns in that game. They did get to the Super Bowl, but of course did not win it, going back to that trend that we have. Bryant McFadden back with us, Luge, Douzable. So, guys, the line is 13.5. It's just south of 2 touchdowns. B-Mac, when you look at this, what do you think about the road spread here as a team that is undefeated and very good going up against a bad team with a big number here?
I think it's dead on, guys. I think it's dead on based on what we've seen from both teams, right? The highs and the lows. Mostly all highs for the Philadelphia Eagles, mostly all lows for the Houston Texans. Yes, playing on the road, it's a short week for both teams, but I like Philadelphia in this spot, and here's why. The talent is there. We all agree that this might be the most talented roster in the National Football League. And get this, they're playing like they're the most talented team, not to mention how dialed in this group is. I saw a picture, I think it was last week after they beat Pittsburgh. These guys were on the bicycle, right, in the locker room, getting their recovery done Sunday. Didn't wait till Sunday. They actually took their pads off and got on the cycle to get some recovery going to have their legs ready for this short week against the Houston Texans. This team is dialed in. And one thing I know about Philadelphia, they start extremely fast. They get off to a fast start, and they usually take the opposing team in deep water, and they drown them fast. There's no fighting. There's no struggling. They drown them real fast. So I think that will be a big part into why Philadelphia covers this game outside of having more talent and being more dialed in. But the way they get off to a fast start, I mean, the game is over for most teams against Philly at halftime.
Yeah, B-Mac, I'm with you. I'm taking the Eagles to cover the 13.5. I know it's a massive number, but I'm looking at Jalen Hurts. This is the first time he's able to come back home and play in front of his friends and family in that stadium he grew up watching. He's going to be excited for this game. You talked about it, the talent deficiency between the two teams. I think it's just too much for the Texans to stay in this game. And then also, you talked about it, Brandon Cooks, their captain, going through what he's going through. How does that affect the locker room going forward? Yes, you can say we're ready, we're going to go out there and play because this is our job and we have to do that. But when your star player, your captain on your team is going through an issue with the upstairs people and wanting to get traded and not getting traded and then not showing up with us to go out and play a game, that hurts in the locker room. So not having Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks, also their best defensive tackle, Malik Collins, is out this game as well. So as far as stopping the Philadelphia's run game, it's going to be tough for them. I think they cover this 13.5 very easily. Take the Eagles to cover the 13.5.
All right, so you guys are both laying the points, laying it with confidence. By the way, a Nevada bettor is in agreement with you. Someone dropped $165K for Philly to cover that 13.5 tonight at Caesars Sportsbook. All right, in terms of props, what do you got for us? And B-Mac, I'll start with you because I teased Miles Sanders. You're bullish on him tonight. You like his number.
No question, I'm high on Miles Sanders. Usually this would be a high number for Miles Sanders based on what we've seen from him throughout the course of the year. But this defense he's playing against is bad. They're at the bottom. I think they're the 32nd team in regards to rushing yards allowed, almost 200 yards to be exact. We saw what Derrick Henry did against them last week. No knock, no surprise there because he does that every time he plays against the Texans. But remember Josh Jacobs the week before. He is still running for first downs against this defense. So I believe Miles Sanders will surpass this total, which is set at 80 and a hook. I go over for Miles Sanders. And then in regards to my second player prop, Davis Mills, his passing yard total is set at 210 and a half. He's averaging around 214 to say the least. But one thing I've seen in regards to Davis Mills, anytime he plays against a defense that has a pulse, we don't see any production from him. You look at when he played against the Broncos, you look at when he played against the Tennessee Titans, you look at when he played against Jacksonville, teams that can rush the passer, he struggled. Oh, by the way, his top 2 wide receivers won't be in this ball game as well. We talked about Brandon Cooks. We know how much he means to Davis Mills. Playing against big play Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Bradbury and crew, Epps, it's going to be a long night. So I take the under in regards to Davis Mills passing yards set at 210 and a half.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Miles Sanders as well, but anytime touchdown. If you look at this Texans defense, you talked about it. They've been abysmal against the run. And in 3 of the last 4 games, they've given up at least 2 rushing touchdowns to the running back position. So I think Miles Sanders finds the end zone. A.J. Brown, over 4.5 receptions. Again, the last 3 or 4 games, the number 1 receiver for the opposite team has gone over 4.5 receptions. The only time that didn't happen was last week, and that's because we know what was happening. Derrick Henry was getting the ball every single play. And then the last one, Dameon Pierce. This Eagles defense, the last 3 out of the last 4 games, have given up at least 20 yards receiving to a running back. I believe Dameon Pierce, a lot of checkdowns. I believe the Eagles will be up big. The Texans will have to pass the ball the whole second half. I think Dameon Pierce gets a couple catches, goes over the 17.5 receiving yards.
Both of our guys bullish on Miles Sanders with different props tonight. B-Mac, we're going to say goodbye, but before we do, hey, show me the sweater. Let's go out with the sweater.
There we go.
All things
we got everything covered on that end.
Appreciate you, B-Mac.
We covered everything on this segment, by the way, guys. So I like it. I like it. We covered everything.
Yes, we did. Also, got to let you know about the Early Edge podcast. The coach, Jonathan Coachman. It is a primetime NFL night. They'll have you covered leading up to kickoff. So it's Coach, probably pop stars, Alan Bell, Sia Najad, Mike McClure, the whole crew. Make sure to check them out on YouTube before the game tonight.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.